Hello and welcome to Lecture 2 in the section Identity Access Management. And this is a new AWS account which I have just created for the purposes of this course. So it has literally never been used before, and this is the first time I've signed in. Now the first thing you'll notice is even though I'm based in the UK, living in London, it signed me in automatically to US West 2, which is based in Oregon. So first thing you might want to do is change your region by clicking up here to somewhere that's close to your location, just so that you get better performance, you get less latency, you don't have to go halfway around the world. So I'm going to choose the EU Island region and make sure I'm working off that. Now this course is on, this lecture is on Identity Access Management, so we want to go in there to begin with. And the first thing you'll see is the landing page or the dashboard page for Identity Access Management. It says, "Welcome to Identity Access Management, IAM users sign in link," and it's just a random set of numbers and then signin.aws.amazon.com. So what we'll do in a little bit is customize that and make it a cloud guru .signin.aws.com. So it's just an easy link to remember. So why don't we just do that now? Call it a cloud guru. Hit yes, create. Now it's going to check that namespace is available, and in this case it is. And that's what I would use now to sign in to my AWS account, is this link up here. And you can send that out to your employees, for example, so that they have an easy to remember URL to sign into the account. Now we can see down here our resources. We've got no users set up, we've got no groups set up, we've got no roles set up, no identity providers, and then we've got our security status. So we've deleted our root access key. That was done automatically because I haven't, like I said, this is a brand new account and it's the first time I've ever signed in. And then the second one says activate multi-factor authentication on your root account. So why don't we just go ahead and do that now. So select the type of multi-factor device to authenticate, a virtual multi-factor device or a hardware multi-factor device. So multi-factor authentication is simply where you have a second means to verify yourself when signing in. So normally you would enter in a username and a password, but passwords can be compromised. Users can pick poor passwords, might choose password 01 or something, and they can be quite easy to compromise. So with multi-factor authentication, it's basically a second way of authenticating you. So I'm going to choose a virtual multi-factor authentication device. So planning on using my phone. It says to activate a multi-factor authentication device, you must first install AWS MFA compatible application on the user's smartphone, PC, or other device. You can find a list of AWS MFA compatible applications here. So I have Google Authenticator installed on my smartphone, so I don't need to do this. So I'll click Next Step. And then it will say if your virtual multi-factor application supports scanning QR codes, scan the following image with your smartphone's camera. So basically you scan that image and it will give you 2 authentication codes. Now I'm not actually going to do this in the lecture simply because it would expose my AWS account to the world. But go ahead and do this on your own console, and then you should be able to set up and enable multi-factor authentication. And I'll come back, I'll go away now and set this up myself and come back in a couple of minutes, and then we'll move on to the next topic. Okay, and welcome back. So I successfully scanned the QR code into my phone, into the Google Authenticator app, and then I entered in 2 consecutive keys. And it has authenticated and enabled multi-factor authentication. So you can see here it's activated it. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go in and create a user in IAM, and we're going to use this user account to sign in to the AWS console moving forward. And this is a security, right now we're signed in with the root account, and AWS recommends that you create users and only ever sign in with the root account where necessary, but normally you would sign in using your own user accounts. And if you think about a large organization who's got the one management console, the root account is exactly that. It's for root users or for super administrators. Normally people would sign in using their single sign-on. So that we're going to maintain that security strategy going forward. So we're going to go through here and create a new user. So just click here and hit create new user. Now I'm just going to create a bogus user because you'll see why in a second. So we'll call him John Smith, John.Smith. And you see here, generate an access key for each user. So this access key will be exposed, and it's only ever exposed when you create a new user for the first time. Once you go past this page, you are not able to get the access key. So because this is a bogus user, I'm quite happy to show you guys. So you can see here the access key ID and then the secret access key. So this key pair is what John Smith would use when he's accessing AWS resources like the command line interface or using this SDK kits that Amazon provide, or if you were making API calls to the Amazon portal. So basically the key ID is going to be his username, and then the secret access key is effectively his password. Now you only get to see this once, and it's when you create a new user. So typically you would download the credentials and then give them to your users. Once you go past this screen, you will not get access to this key value pair anymore. You'll either have to rekey it, or you'll have to recreate the user. So if we click here and go to user actions, we can go to manage access keys. So let's say you didn't download it. You can go in and delete the access keys and then recreate them. So hit delete, that's deleted the access key. Go into manage access keys and we'll create a new one. And now we've got the credentials again. So we click show user credentials. We've got a new key value pair there, which we would then download and store. So if you do forget to do it, you can go back and change it at a later date, or you can delete the user and recreate that user. So just close this off now. Okay, so we've set our user up, and they can access the AWS platform using either the APIs, using the command line interface, or using SDKs. But what they can't do currently is log into the AWS Management Console, simply because they don't have a password. So what we're going to do now is create a password for them. So we click on Manage Password. It says users who will be using the AWS Management Console require a password. Select the options below to manage a new password for the user John Smith. And I'm just going to create an auto-generated password, and I'm going to require John to change his password when he logs in next. So I'm going to hit apply, and it says the user's password has been successfully created. You want to probably download these and to give them to the user. So there's John Smith's password, and we could hit download credentials, which would store it locally. Make sure you store it somewhere securely, and as soon as John logs in after the first time, he'll change his password to something that he can remember. Okay, so we've created John a password, and he'll now be able to log into the AWS console. Unfortunately, he's not a member of any group and he doesn't have any permissions, so he won't be able to do a lot. So if we come back to the dashboard, we can see that we've got 3 green ticks so far, and the next one on the security status drop down box is use groups to assign permissions. So we're going to go in and create a group. So go into groups and hit create new group, and I'm going to call this my developers group. Now, you may remember in the beginning of the first lecture, we talked about different policy templates, and we've got administrator access, power user access, read-only access, and then a whole bunch of others. So basically, administrator access gives you full access to AWS services and resources, and it's effectively what your root account has from day one. Power user access gives you full access but does not allow users to manage other users or groups. And then read-only access is exactly that. It gives you read-only access to AWS services and resources. Now, because this is a developers group, we want to give John as much access as possible, but I don't think he would need to add users and create groups, so I'm going to give him power user access. Now, if you just scroll down, those are the main three, but there's lots of other different policy templates. You can give them, just access to CloudWatch logs and give them full access to that. And you scroll down, you'll see there's a ton of different policy templates that you can use. You can also use the policy generator to generate your own policy templates if the default policy templates don't work for you, or you can assign a custom policy. And a custom policy is basically a script. So what we're going to do is we're going to select a power user access, and it will generate a policy document. So here's your key value pair. You've got your policy name and then your policy document. This document is effectively the same script that you would use if you were doing your own custom policies. Now, you don't need to know how to read this. It's completely out of scope for the exam that we're trying to take, but you should just have an awareness of how it all works. So click next steps, and it will ask us to review our group. We can see the group name is developers, and we're giving them power user access. Now we'll create our group. And there we go, we've got our group created, but we have no users in our group. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add users to the group. So click on add users. We select John Smith. And there we go, John Smith is now a user. We can see him here of the group. If we go back to our dashboard, we'll be able to see a new green tick has been assigned to us. The last thing we're going to do is assign a identity access management password policy. So your password policy effectively is just what governs the user password. So they must have at least one uppercase letter, one lowercase letter, etc. So I'm going to say my minimum password length will be 10 characters, and that I require at least one uppercase letter, one lowercase letter, one number, one non-alphanumeric password, and I'm going to make my password basically expire every 90 days. And I'm going to prevent password reuse, so that my users can't reuse the same password over and over again. And I'm going to make sure that they remember, or that Amazon remembers, the last 3 passwords that they've used. And so now I click Apply Password Policy, and if we go back to our dashboard, we've got 5 out of 5 security status things complete. Now, the one last thing in this lecture before we move on to the next section is we're going to look at roles, and you will need to do this on your console in order for the EC2 section to work properly for you. So let's click on roles. And a role effectively is, it's like a group, except you can add not just users to it, but you can add AWS resources to it. So you can say, I will allow my EC2 instances to be able to access S3, as opposed to storing a user's credentials on EC2 to give them that access. So what we're going to do now is create exactly that, a role allowing our EC2 instances to access our S3 resources. So I'm going to call this S3 underscore access. Okay, so now we're going to go to our service roles, and we want our S3, our EC2 instances to be able to access our S3 buckets. So here we go. Amazon EC2 allows EC2 instances to call AWS services on your behalf. So that's the role I'd like to select. You've got all kinds of different roles. You've got directory services, Lambda, S3 invocation for Lambda functions, etc. You can also allow a role for cross-account access and role for identity provider access, which is things like Facebook, etc. So right now I'm going to click on Amazon EC2. And then I can give my EC2 instances full administrator access, power user access, read-only access to my entire Amazon resources, but what I want specifically is S3 access. So I'm going to scroll down, and just up here we see Amazon S3 full access. So it provides full access to all buckets via the AWS Management Console. So I'm going to select that. You can see here it creates another key value pair, so the policy name and then the policy document. And again, you don't need to understand what this is, it's outside the scope of this course, but it's just good to understand that it's programmatically happening in the background. And we hit next, and it will ask us to review what it is we're trying to do. So we're creating an S3 role, and we're setting permissions to Amazon S3 full access. Now we create the role. And now we can see S3 access is a role, and we can assign that role to any EC2 instance that we spin up. And when we assign that role to an EC2 instance, it will automatically have full access to an S3 bucket. Okay, so that concludes the lecture on identity access management from a practical point of view. In this lecture, we've created our multi-factor authentication on our root account. We've created individual users, and we've assigned those individual users to groups and assigned those groups permissions. And then we've also applied an identity access management policy, and we've created a new role to allow our EC2 instances to access the S3 buckets. Okay, we'll have a conclusion slide, conclusion lecture next, and then feel free to move on to the next section. Thank you.